if you get to the basic, the last station on the line, in a way there's not much to say, but you can repeat. That's what happens. You need to repeat, repeat, repeat. It's not repeat, rinse, cycle, but repeat, repeat, repeat. Because the obviousness escapes us. We don't see the obviousness of what's looking is what we're looking for. We miss it. Because there's the seeming calibration, and it's only seeming, it only appears. See, the greatest news of all is all the source of all our troubles and woes is an impossibility. Yeah? So what you are, in a sense, nothing ever could happen to, because it's not a thing to have anything happen to it. I mean, absolutely. Yeah? What we're not, seemingly, a lot shit happens, and it's not even enough that we have what can happen. We actually have a huge realm of effect called what was, what happened, and what could happen, yeah? Which is mind-boggling. It would be more than enough just for what the shit that can happen to us here as this, but the mental state piles on and has a lot of shit coming out of what's not happening, and then a whole lot of a never-ending volume of shit making out of what's not happening in the future. Yeah? So that which we are, that's what's so confusing, because our experience here is basically verifying that we're a long-lasting, independent, separate thing, and that our condition is based on other conditions. Yeah? And that we have to get those other conditions correct, yeah, so that we can be okay. And then the biggest impediment is getting them correct, because sometimes you can pull it off seemingly, but what happens is everything lines up and you feel great and everything's cool at 9 o'clock, but 9:01 shows up, 9:02 shows up, and then the variability shifts, so you can never get it all in line. Yeah, and if you possibly do in 1 second, you got tons of other seconds that are going to come after. So you're basically, it's sort of like, it's like your sandcastle is constantly under attack from the high tide. We don't even get a break of low tide. It's just an incessant tide that another minute, another hour, and then what happens? It's like you pushed all the springs in and they go bing, bing. You get a cold, bing, allergy, one, you get a call, your girlfriend left, bing, bing, and then you're just trying to keep it all down, and then it gets to be to such a, holy cow, holy cow.
I know.
My brother from another mother. Oh, yes, he was a special guest. I didn't know was coming. Yeah. Don't worry, no one's here. No one showed up. Yeah. So basically, let's say in recovery, what's mostly driving people crazy is their thought system, yes? There's a condition that we are inherently, which is we're conscious, and therefore there's a lot of stuff that we're conscious of we'd rather not be conscious of, yeah? And for many of us, we'd rather not be conscious of that stream of thought that doesn't seem to ever shut off. Like when you do something, usually you can stop doing it. Like you run and then you get to a point where you stop running. But the thinking doesn't go by that rule, yeah? You know, you go, okay, I'm gonna stop thinking about this, do you? Yeah, and then doesn't it return to like imaginary scenes of crimes for like 30 years? It's things that may have never even happened are being constantly thought about. And even you make it, you just say, listen, thought system, please, for one night, shut down at 11 p.m. You know what I mean? I taped that show. I'd really like to see Narcos without your interrupting it, you know? Can I fucking please have it? You know what I mean? But 3 a.m, you're wide awake because you are awake, but what happens is you're awake to the thoughts, yeah? You're not awake to the spirit because you can't be awake to the spirit. You're awake as spirit, yeah? So when that's not clear, then we're awake to a lot of other stuff. So we're truly awake to what's implying, assuming, insinuating, presupposing that we're a thing. We're totally awake to that, and in being awake to that, we're unawake seemingly to our own nature. That's it. That's the thing that you run into all the time. A great master, Ramana Maharshi, put it this way. So here's the state of being, let's say. Yes? You're in this state. And then there's a presupposing that you're a non-existent thing, a body. That's what the mental state's doing. It's presupposing. It's supposing right now, but when it supposes you as a body, it presupposes that you were a body even before you suppose yourself as a body. You see? It's like the bait goes into this sea of consciousness, and when mind rises to bite it, when it bites the bait, when it takes the bait, it's a fish, but it appears as a fish, but it also appears as a historical fish. Suddenly, oh, I've taken this bait so many fucking times, and I'm really worried I'll be taking. All of that arose right at that moment of contact, not before or after. So this presupposing that you and I are a non-existent thing. Now that would be more than enough, but here's the triple whammy. And then wanting to get salvation for the non-existent thing. This is mind-boggling. You don't have to go to page 5 of the scripture. This should be, this statement, or like, I like it because it's not mine, it's none, well, none of it is, but the idea of selfing is too, I've heard it too many times, but it's basically describing what selfing is, which is a presupposing of a non-existent thing, and then that non-existent thing seen to be existing wants salvation for it because it's having a lot of trouble, and the logic is totally airtight, but it's insane. Because you're not a non-existent thing. If you were a non-existent thing, then the demand that provokes all the seeking would make total sense because you need fucking relief. That's one of the biggest reliefs of this whole message is you get freed from the need to be liberated. Because what needs to be liberated is the non-existent thing. What we are doesn't need any liberation. It's what we take ourselves to be needs liberation. So selfing is just all the mental activity that supports this presupposing of a non-existent thing. Yeah? And then it's wanting to get salvation for the non-existent thing, wanting to buy a pair of pants for the non-existent thing, want to get a triple-decker bologna sandwich for the non-existent thing, want to get some sex for the non-existent thing, and so on and so forth. It's not like that's the only thing it's looking for. It sees the bologna sandwich as salvation. It sees the sex as salvation. It sees all of these substitutes for the real thing as salvation. So the presupposing, the inferring, the assuming, the insinuating, the implying, all that's the whole mental state. That's all it's doing with all its fucking reams and reams of mental minutia is just that. It's inferring that you're a body. It's presupposing that you're a body. It's implying that you're a body. It's assuming that you're a body. It's doing all of that. And what happens is, if you're not awake to being awake, you'll be awake as that. And that's sleep. When you're awake as the action figure, that's sleep. That's being unconscious to conscious contact. Everything else is, see what happens is people, we don't pay enough attention to that. They move to the next thing. I've got to find a process and a program, and I'm going to get vigilant, and I'm going to meditate every day. That's fucking great, but all the while, what the mental state's going to use the meditation for is to imply you're the meditator. And there's the bondage of self. And I do not believe you can meditate yourself out of being the meditator. I do not, because you've never been a meditator. And in a sense, that's what you're attempting to do. You're attempting to meditate yourself out of that which is being implied to be the meditator. Where else you're trying to get out constantly? But every time, every form of getting out can be, I'm not saying it is, but it's definitely a possibility, is being used to imply you're in. And the whole dilemma is you believe you're in an imaginary place. As soon as that's seen through, you realize you are what you've been looking for. It just suddenly didn't happen September 10th, 2015, when you get that you are what you're looking for. It's like you've always been that which you've been looking for, and you always will be that which you're looking for. It covers all the imaginary field of the presupposing, the assuming, the implying. It's like just blows it all down. Yeah? As soon as you realize what's looking is what you're looking for, it's always been that way. It isn't a sudden, you haven't done enough to finally make it happen. It's always been that way. That's the relaxation, because it's so beautiful when what you think you have, which is what you truly are, can't be lost because you're not having it, you're being it. It's totally different. Being and knowing is totally, totally different. Knowing implies a knower, and that could be efforting and thought and fucking studying, but being is being. That's why awareness is so beautiful, because if awareness was doing awareness, it would need a fucking break. It would say, all right, Saturday and Sunday, I'm fucking tired of doing awareness. You know what I mean? I'm fucking just want to fucking zone out and watch Die Hard 1, 2, 6, you know? Fucking just get into Bruce Willis and fucking, no. But awareness is being awareness. That means it's always that which it is. It's not in a context of I wasn't, I work hard, then I become. It's not in that. There's no time involved in it. That's why the conscious contact, which is our basic experience, is the baseline of all experience here, is never demonstrating any thought or effort to be conscious. We think we have to exhibit a lot of thought or effort to be conscious because we're a non-existent thing as a body. We're trying to resurrect a fucking non-existent thing. That's going to take a whole lot to make that fucking conscious. And the biggest problem is, how am I going to sustain when I reach the level of a consciousness that seems to be conscious? More retreats, longer retreats, more fucking meditations, this and that. It's a never-ending, it's like a fire that will go out at every drop of any hat. But what we are is self-burning. It burns itself. It doesn't, the fuel that being thrives on is the act of being. Yes? The mental state is not about being, it's about wasing and willing. And in its world, to get to being would be a lot of fucking effort. Yeah? And the problem is, to stay at being, man, you got to live in a freaking monastery in the hills in China. You could never possibly do it with kids or a job. I mean, there'll be so many distractions. I've got to live in a cloistered, hermetically sealed space so that I can feel like I'm conscious and nothing's pulling my attention. The problem is, the pulling of your attention is really because it's your attention. Your attention as this can be pulled constantly. But if you really saw attention, you see attention as just a field. Like the light of awareness is dispersed. It's not concentrated. If you take the sun and you concentrate it, it could burn something to fucking death. But while it's dispersed, everyone thrives in it. But if that same sun was like focused, you'd be gone. It would burn you up like that. This is what's happening with people. This has been taken to be the center of the universe, and now that mind, that attention, that dispersed attention, is now been focused by the mental state to be all about you. Like we say in AA, you're not much, but you're all that you think about. That's way too much power. This cannot do well as the center of the universe. You know what I mean? It's way too big of a fucking responsibility. And all the thinking isn't going to make it fucking so. So the whole point is that there is a point. That's the problem. The whole point is we think about how to stock the journey, how to get to the journey, get the right maps, but it's all based on a journey that we're going to launch on. That's not it. You are what you're looking for. The seeker is the sought. And if you use mind to seek mind, you can do it for eons and nothing's going to happen. If you use light to seek light, you can do it for eons and nothing's going to happen. And if you use the Buddha to seek the Buddha, you can do it for eons and nothing's going to happen. Why? Why is that? Because the fundamental mistake, the fundamental miscalibration hasn't been seen, and therefore in not seeing it, it doesn't get corrected. You take it to be a fact when it's not a fact. And everything is based on that as a fact, and all the mental logic is based on that as a fact. Look what it does with spirituality. It makes it into a journey. What takes a journey? Have you ever seen Spirit at the travel agent? I like to pack, I think I'm going to have a carry-on, you know what I mean? And there'll be two of us. No, a body goes on a journey. The whole way we frame everything is referring back to a body. That's the craziness of trying to get a spiritual condition as a body. How is a non-existent thing able to get a spiritual condition? It's like pouring on some spiritual skin. It's going to slough off because there's no vibrancy. It's dead. It's non-existing. Spirit can't thrive on it. So if you get a little relief from all that which is being used by the mental state to reinforce the idea of a long-lasting, independent, separate entity, that's when things become revealed. It's in losing interest, yeah? Because I could go, all right, I realize self is the problem, and then take a 2-year course of studying the obsession with self. That's obsession with self. So you can't get out of it. Self can't get out of self. Why is that? If self was a real thing, and then there was another self that could be in self, then you would think the other self could go out of self. But there isn't two selves. There's no self. That's why you can't get out of it. You're not in it. It doesn't matter if you're not in somewhere. It doesn't matter how many stories you have about being in it, nor how many journeys in the past or planned to get out of it. It's not going to happen because you're not in it. Everything here is an activity. When you believe you're in something here, it's only an activity. Yeah? In other words, bondage is an activity, selfing is an activity, everything here is an activity. There are no nouns to be found. Everything is verbing here. Everything. That's why we're having trouble recognizing ourselves, because we're looking for it as a thing when it isn't. It's like you go to the river and you want to capture the river. So you get a glass of water, you get a glass, get it, go home with the river, and now you put Missouri on it and you think you've got the Missouri River, but you've lost the greatest essence of the river, which is rivering. It's now a stagnant water in a container. That's not rivering. You know what I mean? This is what we do. We want to know what we are instead of being what we are. We just caught ourselves being right there. those 8 seconds in time. Did that acknowledgement of being motivate you to join another retreat? Or did it just produce a relaxation and not even an aha? It's prior to aha. See, there it may be knowing something, but this is being something, because you are that which you'd like to know. That's why you can't know it. It's this one fucking persistent, obstinate fact that the mental state cannot get around. You cannot know what you are. You cannot find what you are. You cannot study what you are. You cannot approach what you are, nor can you depart from what you are. There's no credit or blame the mental state can make out of being. It can't give itself credit for getting there, and it can't give itself blame for fucking leaving. That's the forgiveness prior to all fucking mistakes. Nothing ever happened. Everything is happening, but nothing ever happened. And you know how knowing something or wanting to know something will wind you up in a certain way. And I'm telling you the same, when there's a recognition of being, it will unwind you in a certain way. You'll recognize it. It's like getting massaged by a different hand, yes? It's totally different. And you'll be able to recognize the difference now. One little sample of being will show you everything else that you need to know, because everything else that you need to know is not about that. Yeah? All you need to know is what you're not, and then the being will become obvious. You're not the thinker, the being becomes obvious. You're not the feeler, the being. Doesn't mean there's no feeling and there's no thoughts. It's just removing the imaginary non-existent statement of being the thing that's thinking, being the thing that's feeling, being the thing that does. See, in this court out here, you're going to be convicted of what you do. You're not convicted of the thoughts, because no one can see the thoughts. Thoughts can only produce like an effect here, other than on us, through action. It has to compel an action. And then if the thought finds life here through an action, it tries to extend its life by having the effect last as long as possible. So I had one action when I was young, went home, got irritable, restless, discontent, was going to drive back to the bar, got run over by a car. Now leaving my sister's house was not produced by anything other than thought. My mind went on an advertising campaign. I felt irritable, restless, discontent, which is its most fucking, it's its greatest customer. When your baseline is irritability, restlessness, and discontent, you're apt to buy every fucking advertisement. I went to that car, drove to that bar, never made it to the bar, and that thought found expression out here, and its effects, it extended itself as an effects on what the mental state takes to be real. So I've had this injury from that car accident 24/7 since 1980. That's 36 years of chronic effect. Yeah. Now that thought that compelled me to go out that night has been had many other times, but it didn't find fruition because at times maybe it wasn't strong enough, but I'll tell you what makes all thoughts strong is the my. If you could see, if Duncan's thoughts said, go out to that bar, I'd say, fucking Duncan's crazy. I'm not going to listen to his thoughts. But the crazy thoughts that go through here, if they're held as mine, they sound like fucking great advice. You don't see it? Recognize your activity. You're disguising yourself as self by being identified as a non-existent thing. It can only seem happen and only in a matter in time. It could never be so because you are what you are and you're not of thing. Watch it. Watch what happens. People get, the thought system leads seeming people to its idea of surrender, which is fuck it. And when you arrive at fuck it, you're apt to do almost anything. And I assure you, it's going to tell you some good ideas of what to do. Which is, oh, fuck it, let's get loaded, or fuck it, let's do this, or fuck it, let's do that. And maybe many years you get away with it, but one night you're going to walk out in front of traffic and you're going to get whacked and you'll be a paraplegic for the rest of your fucking life. Yeah? Stuff like that will happen. It can. I was totally surprised by the severity of the consequences. I was living like bitching about the most minor shit, and then that night I got whacked, and that was a pretty fucking big whack. And it put the fear of God in me, in a sense. Because I cannot live. I'm not going to make it out here if I'm led by this. This thought system is a failed system. It says it in the program of recovery, right in the book. It just says, take it. It says, why are you in so much fear today? Why are you in so much fear today? I'm sure you have tons of stories why, but it just interrupts that and says, isn't it because self-reliance has failed you? Obviously, then self-reliance is a failed system. The GPS most of us are listening to is a failed system. It's got fucking maps from like 1948. You punch in happy, joyous, and freedom. Oh, that's going to be a long fucking time. That's going to be about 2,000 miles. And it just so happened all along the way, my cousins and my nephews own all the fucking rest stops. Yeah, yes. And what happens? It fails, and who's to blame? Inevitably you blame them but inevitably you blame you, because that's the fail-safe mechanism of self-centeredness. When nothing works, you'll be the one who finally is to blame. It can't be Buddhism. Hey, I bet you it is. Buddhism can be used for the bondage of self just as easy as fucking knocking over banks. Exactly, because you'll think you're the Buddhist. You don't think there's bondage? What do you think? It's if you have loose clothing, you're not bonded to self? You know, you don't have sex, you're not bonded to self. All those fucking things don't work. This is a simple invitation. Does the thought system present you as a body? When you're thought about, aren't you thought about as a body? Even if you're thought about as spirit, it is in the frame of being a body. Yes or no? Yes. Right there, it's insane, because it's misidentifying you. You're not a body. So therefore, all the other fucking thoughts are duplicating the same mistake. When you were a kid, did last week and next week ever override your fun of that day? When you were 3 or 4, was your day, your Saturday morning ruined by next week or last week? Was it ever? No, because it hadn't formulated yet. The mental state hadn't developed enough to produce its huge schematic of you as a historical figure that's worthy of being thought about in the past, and definitely worried about being concerned about what will happen to it in the future. And what happened? Life stopped being life is, what's happening, life is happening. Then it turned into an interpretation, life's happening to me. Simple as that. And suddenly, the sense and the wonder and awe and all those things slowly started fading out. Yeah. And then a story just became like the new weather front. And it laid on us, and it fucking neutered us, basically. Most people, when they're here and they're flipping out, it is never about Wednesday night. It's about last week or next week. How could that be happening? If something was here flipping it out, we'd all be flipped out. But it isn't. You're in your own little private porno theater, getting either Dallas is doing you or you're doing Dallas. It's just that way. I've seen it because I've had relief from it. The only way you know the problem is from the solution. That's the only fucking way. Everyone who thinks they're an expert on the problem, who's still in the problem, they're not an expert. They're like what the Course in Miracles would call unhealed healers. Their intentions are good, but the way, when it goes through, it's going to be co-opted and it's going to be made into something else. So the same thing, the thoughts are being used to facilitate the bondage of self. Feelings are being used to facilitate the bondage of self. Actions are being used to facilitate the bondage of self. Time is being used to facilitate the bondage of self. They are not what's binding you to a self. They're being used to. They're like the application, but the glue is the my. You're identified as the thinker, as the feeler, as the doer, as the haver. You're identified as something that's in time, so time has a huge influence on us here. Time is so strong now that yesterday and tomorrow constantly outshine today's sun. We're in almost a sense of slavery, basically. And the beautiful news is it could never have fucking happened. It's truly, truly dreaming. Yeah? And the only way something can seem to be so real here is that it's seeming to be real to what is real. We are the reality. And you'll recognize yourself as a verb, not as a noun. In the seeing of what you're not, you'll have an intimation of what you are, which is the seeing. It's not the seeing, it's seeing. You want to call it awareness or whatever, but it precedes all other things because it's not a thing. Then you'll see what you are is an afterthought. You come after conscious contact. You are not that which is in conscious contact. The thought that you're you comes after the conscious contact. The consciousness is what's experiencing things here. The consciousness is truly what's living here. Yeah? The idea of me being that is an afterthought. And if you don't believe me, listen to people talk about their feelings. They'll go, oh, I didn't want to feel that. See? The feeling occurred, consciousness noted it, and then the thought that you showed up later, and then from this position, you go, I didn't want to feel it, but this is a powerless position because the feeling already happened. And why it's so perplexing is the presupposing that we were before, and if I'm before the feelings and they're my feelings, why aren't I having the feelings I want? The same thing with thoughts. Why are these thoughts not obeying me? I am the thinker. That lends some kind of proprietoriness on the event, it seems to. And this is the insane fucking rub the mental state has. It's the dilemma of powerlessness is that it thinks it has power when it doesn't have any power. And it's super fucking pissed off about it. And it's in the admittance of powerlessness, then suddenly the plug that you're plugged into, the plug will be pulled out of the socket and put into another one, and then power will start flowing through this, into this life. You now have a verifiable source of power. And therefore, as you stay in the admittance of powerlessness, you'll never experience what powerlessness is like. You won't get fucking frustrated, you won't think this and you won't think that because you'll have power. You're going to be led no matter what. The mental state can lead you or being can lead you. You're going to be led here no matter what. And you can tell the difference, especially if you had supposedly an experience of being an addict in alcoholism. You know damn well what the tyranny of selfing is like. Yeah. In the Course, they would call it the Holy Spirit. In recovery, we call it the higher power. Hold on a sec, bro. Just do the riff. Yeah? Whatever you like to call it. It's all made up. You're that which you're looking for, but it works here. Yeah? Because maybe you're not ready to meet yourself as yourself. So you have to meet yourself as an anonymous influence, but it's only you. It's only Big M Mind. It really is. It's like a pantomime. We're doing like hand puppets, and then you realize they both end up. What? Oh yeah. That's fine. That's called dreaming yourself out of the dream. You're puppeting, and suddenly, yes, I have mine the higher power. And then it says it beautifully in recovery. You'll feel a new power flow in. You'll sense the conscious presence of what you are, which is being. What you're not doesn't have a conscious presence. Its presence is built or implied by past fixation and future fixation. It doesn't have a light in and of itself. It catches pale reflections. It's inferred that I was there. It's going to be inferred I will be there. And then its logic says, therefore I am here as a body. It's fucking not so. Do anything you really love and forget the sense of self. Can happen all day. You're constantly being forgotten because the self has to be remembered. What you are isn't about, you don't have to remember what you are because you are that. It's always incessantly on. There's no point where it could ever be remembered. It would have to be forgotten, and it's impossible for what you are to forget what it is. It can only seem to forget it in this little charade, this little dream theater, which is based on space and time. In eternity, this could never have fucking happened. Every night, we have the example of it. We're going to all hopefully go to bed tonight. Yeah? The whole circus of Paul gets completely shut down as if it never happened. And then suddenly, the next day, the circus comes into town. You see your name on it. Oh, you got the clown suit. All right. So you're juggling again. Then you go to sleep, and then it's all gone. And then, all right. You know what I mean? The beautiful thing is you can take those clown boots off at night. It all gets erased like an Etch-a-Sketch, completely, as if it never happened. Because it never did happen. Haven't you ever felt that? Something's going on. Like I had it all the time since I've been doing talks, and thank God I never did them, or this wouldn't be happening. I would have given up a long time ago. But I remember I'd come in and there'd be a lot of pressing issues. My fairy princess just left me outside the meeting. I was sick as a dog. I was waiting here if I had AIDS or something. And I mean, they were really paramount. And I'd sit in the room and something would move through and all of those effects would be forgotten, like immediately. Like they never happened. Well, after having this free sample tons of fucking times, my mind made the leap. Yes, it never fucking happened. Something that's truly so would take time to disappear. It would take time. You'd have to get a moving van to move it out. But something that isn't so takes no time not to appear because it isn't so. It's only appearing because you're appearing here in a certain way as a non-fucking existent thing, wanting to get salvation from its seeming condition. When you're confronted with that when you're young, addiction makes fucking sense. I want to get out of this freaking dilemma. But it doesn't work. Because again, selfing is doing, the real thief, it's like Dracula will go on every fucking vampire hunt and kill all the other vampires with Van Helsing and everyone else. It could care less because it's going to keep all attention off of it. The selfing is just exactly like that. It's like the thief that will read the crime reports every day in the paper. He'll be paranoid about being taken advantage of when it's already taken advantage of this possibility. And then anytime it can go into any area of your life, because when it starts coming in and you're there and you open a door and you go, oh, it's me, and you let it in. You call it you. You don't think so? Read the big book. It says it perfectly. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. So it's obviously Bill W., knowing or unknowingly, because I think it was a download anyway, he's making the difference between self and us, yes? This is us, and then there's I call it a parasitical movement, foreign installment, any way that you can image it not being you, whatever works, use it, yeah? So there it goes. So being convinced, and that means to believe with certainty, that self manifested in various ways. Now, it doesn't say that self has defeated us because there is no self, but the idea of self manifesting in various ways will defeat you. Yeah? And all right, so now if you're convinced of that, we'll look at its, meaning self's, common manifestations. And this has gone over all the freaking time. And it says the next paragraph is resentment. So resentment, in this logic, is a manifestation of self. Then why the hell do you keep calling the resentments yours? You're pledging allegiance to the parasite. You're claiming its expressions or manifestations is yours. You cannot seemingly be more identified with something if some foreign thing's expressing through you and you're calling it yours, your expressions. That's called the act of being identified. That's it. That's it. That's the activity. At that moment, the activity of the mental state is identified as a non-existent thing. That's it. It's not so. So exactly where you think you are as a self, that's what you really are is there. And it can see, when you're not seeing the selfing, you're looking from it, yeah? If you don't see the selfing, you'll be looking from the selfing, yeah? But the possibility is if I'm not that, you'll see selfing. You'll see it as an activity. It can never reach any higher level than seemingly so. It has to appear to be true to us. If it doesn't, its effects diminish. Because its effects aren't driven by they're driven by us. By us being identified as it, we're giving out like God-like juice over to that little mental activity playing God. That's what it does. And if it can't play God on everyone and everything, it will definitely play God on your ass. So there's a solution. From the problem's point of view, from the solution's point of view, there is no problem. It's an activity. From the problem's point of view, you need a fucking solution. If you find the solution, right, it will inform you it's an activity, the problem, and therefore there's no need for a solution. That's a solution. If you are the solution, then you are always available at all times, right where you are. The solution will always be available at all times, right where you are, with no requirement necessary to meet it, because you are it. Yes? That's a solution. If you're not the solution, how can you have confidence in it? It could move away from you. It could hide itself. The only way, true solution, it has to be you. If you're the activity of the problem, then the solution has to be at that exact same point where the activity of the problem's happening. If not, the problem would have too much sway and it may take you too long to get the solution. But the solution is right there at all times with no requirement necessary to meet it. So you read something in a scripture and the mental state wants to put a period on it. Just leave it open-ended. The mind itself will reveal. Yeah? What's looking is what you're looking for can issue like an avalanche of volumes of sense-felt information that the mind will entertain. Yes? It doesn't need a dissertation. It needs a humble invitation or a correction. It's truly like, you see the cigarette packs, and then you have that warning, cigarette smoking may be dangerous to your health. They should have the presupposing of a non-existent thing, wanting to get salvation for a non-existent thing, fucking stamped in every front of every spiritual book. And then add another sentence. Your spiritual practices themselves, if your spiritual practices themselves are reinforcing the idea of the non-existent thing, how can they destroy it? Bingo, you'll never make it to the fucking cashier. You'll say, if I'm going to read one of these, I'm getting it out of the library. I'm not paying anymore for this. We went to a bookstore that had a 900-page book on consciousness. It's mind-boggling. And it may have been great, but you're conscious. Why would you want to study what you are as a topic? Why wouldn't you want to just be it? Being it is going to be much 900 pages of consciousness? I could probably get better jobs if I was an expert on consciousness, but we all are. You can't be more expert than being it. You can't get any better than that. You're an expert. It's one of the most underappreciated, incredible demonstrations of all time. Just the basic fact of consciousness in contact getting dismissed with a fucking story. I mean, we're so in love, the mental state is so in love with its little making of being an action figure that it can actually, in time, forget what it is, consciousness. It must really, really love it. Because I would never forget consciousness for any of you. Fuck, no way. I'd say, if I was you, it'd suck. but I being this you, it sucks, but it could get great. I'm holding out. She's gonna come, hopefully in the senior center. We'll be wheelchairing together. I'm not giving up hope. It's going to get better. You wouldn't wait for anything other than you that long. Identification as what you're not is a really fucking, really, 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 really perverse love affair. Like the Buddhism, they call it cherishing of self, and it's a beautiful statement because for this to keep on getting blown into and making it seemingly real, there's got to be a real fascination with it. Yeah, because it's boring as hell if it's somebody else. If someone came, if this room came and wanted to talk to me about themselves for 12 hours, I'd fucking kill them. But you've been listening to this about you for 40 years. 50 years. The reason why it does all this shit and gets away with it, we can't entertain being free from it. We're entertaining being free as it. It's included. No matter how bad it gets, we're never going to turn around and look at it as a foreign object. We're going to want it to go along with us. Yeah, so that's it. You gotta feel it, eh? In this room? It's a sense, man. It's a free sample. Do you think it happens here? It's not happening here. The gods of the mental state get overwhelmed by the satsang, and then what's obvious is seen as obvious.